Hi everyone, welcome to the Mind Blown Zone, episode 35. This one is called Did We Agree to Be Brainwashed? How you doing, Brad?
Never better. How about yourself, Matt?
Never better, Brad. This is the high point. Hopefully it's all uphill
Awesome.
from here.
We'll see. Looking forward to it today.
Oh, for sure. This is going to be a really interesting format. We've done this format before in the episode called Judgment. Basically, Brad is going to put forward a introductory thesis. And from there, I'm going to start to ask questions to just dig deeper, put pressure on the thesis, raise devil's advocate style objections, and just we're going to see what comes out of it, okay? So I'm just going to read a little introductory script to get the juices flowing. Ready for this, Brad?
I'm ready. Let her rip.
All right, here it comes. We generally believe that our beliefs are corresponding to reality. It doesn't occur to us to ask, I wonder to what extent I'm brainwashed. We may assume that some of our beliefs are inaccurate or come from authorities that may have slightly deceived us. But would we ever ponder, what if almost everything I believe I know is total baloney? We have metaphysical beliefs, religious beliefs, ethical beliefs, political beliefs. We have beliefs about health, success, and just generally how things work. And we always seem pretty sure that it's all true. Though, let's hear from another perspective. Let's hear a proposition that perhaps almost everything we believe was put there outside of our awareness. And then, and then let's ask, what is this brainwashing? Why was it done? And by whom? All right,
Nice.
Brad, take it away.
All right. That's a great intro there. And I wanted to start this off today talking about the idea, first of all, that I know I'm still brainwashed in any number of different areas. I can't, one of the ideas, one of the, one of the profound essences of brainwashing is you don't know you're brainwashed. So I happen to feel that I'm less brainwashed than most people, only because I've done mountains of research on all these different topics over the last 2 decades. Only to come to find that some of the many of the things that we've been taught simply aren't true. But most people believe them, and of course, I recognize that the whole point of being brainwashed is you wouldn't know that you're brainwashed. And so, and I'll talk about the terms a little bit here, that could also be used. Some people don't like this term and have this idea that brainwashing means, some wacky scientists, hypnotist swinging a watch in front of you and you're following it. And then you go off into Never Land and he tells you to do something crazy, and that's brainwashing. And that's not how I'm using the term. That's hypnosis. And I'm saying all these words can replace brainwashing. So you could say propagandized, you could say programmed, you could say indoctrinated, or you could even say mind controlled. All of those effectively mean the same thing as far as I'm concerned. Does any questions or problems with that, Matt?
All good so far.
Okay. So what exactly does it mean to be brainwashed or indoctrinated or programmed in this way? It really comes down to this word belief. And I often say, and I think I mentioned it in previous podcasts, that very often beliefs masquerade as truths in our reality. And the way that usually happens is more and more people believing something tends to make it more true for not only themselves, but for all of us. And I'll get into that a little bit deeper in the podcast here. But just keep that idea in the back of your mind that a belief is effectively a little bit of brainwashing. That makes sense?
Okay.
It's not something that you can easily confirm for yourself, and for that reason, you believe it, right? If it's easy to confirm, like someone tells you the sky's blue, and you can look up in the sky and say, "Well, yeah, it does look blue." So that's kind of beyond a belief. But if someone tells you the sky really isn't blue, it's all the other colors of the light spectrum except blue, right? That's something you kind of have to believe, right? Unless you are an expert in colors and lights and so forth. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, the point is that we treat the way we live in our lives in a certain way based on an untold number of beliefs that we all hold. And most of them are collective beliefs. And anytime that your belief is different from the collective, it tends to get a little awkward, right? You're a little bit of an outsider or an outcast or somebody that doesn't quite fit in so nicely, a black sheep. So it's much easier, as far as getting along in society and fitting in, to believe what everybody else believes. So that adds to the brainwashing, as it were, is like you just accept what everybody else believes because if everybody believes it, it must be true. So that's kind of how we get ourselves into the position of being brainwashed. So that was kind of my opening salvo. Any questions or comments on that section, Matt?
Nope, nope. I'm mostly going to let you go through this whole thing.
Okay. So yeah, so this idea that I'm getting at here is this collective agreement or peer pressure, and these are again just they're so numerous that we don't even think twice about them. They're everywhere, and you just grow up learning them. Your parents teach them to you, your teacher, your friends at school, and these things become truths to you. But really, what it is it's brainwashing, as I'm using the term, or programming. And of course, we get them from the TV, we get them from the movies. It's coming at us in all directions, advertising. And, I think another important idea to convey is that it's not like there's some evil genius that's somehow brainwashing, us directly, right? It's this idea that these higher ups are in control of the flow of information that reaches us, and it trickles down from these higher ups, and it goes to their, the next level down, the inferiors, and then to the next level. By the time you reach it, it could have gone through 30 levels of people who have taken this information from these higher ups, so to speak, and condensed it into what is going to be presented to the mass population. So that's how it gets done. And again, it's through media, education, academia, and all of our major institutions, government, everywhere you look. This is happening. And I'll try to give a few key examples. I think maybe a great example that's been getting on under my skin lately is this word democracy. And almost everybody in the mainstream is still using it, right? That America is a democracy. And we need to protect the democracy. We need to spread democracy. And I've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but that United States of America was never a democracy, and it isn't a democracy now, right? But if you go out on the street, I wouldn't even say, if you pulled 1,000 people randomly on the street, I'd guess all 1,000 would agree that America is a democracy. You'd have to probably get to 10,000 people before somebody would be able to say, actually, it's a constitutional republic. And there's nothing anywhere in any of our founding documents or amending documents since that suggests that America was set up to be a democracy. So that's a pretty clear example of how everybody has been brainwashed into thinking that America is a democracy. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So you're saying this existence of a collective opinion on something exists as a source of or a cause of brainwashing?
Well, effectively, everybody is brainwashed into thinking the United States of America is a democracy, a political organization known as a democracy, but it isn't. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing about it is actually. And that's where we have the electoral college versus the popular vote, and the popular vote plays into the electoral college, blah blah blah. But the electoral college proves that it's not a democracy, but doesn't matter because everybody for the last 50, 70, 80 years has been taught that America is a democracy. So that's what everybody believes. You probably if you went to like a rest home, like a nursing home or something, and talked to some of the seniors there, I bet you some of them would say America isn't a democracy because they learned, back in the 1940s or 50s or whatever, something different. But I could come up with, numerous examples like we've talked about in past podcasts, like the word law, like, having to wear your seatbelt when you drive. That's a law, a traffic law, but it's not. It's a statute, right? It's not a law. laws are immutable and unchangeable. We've talked about that before. Or the stuff that you have in your purse or your wallet, call it money, right? Everybody calls it money, but it does not have all the attributes of money. The big one being able to hold its value. So because it doesn't hold its value, it can't be money. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
So just
Yeah, I
some
think that's a pretty good example.
couple of examples there. And I'll just take that right into this idea that, for, just talking about kind of more recent examples, like the Kennedy assassination, JFK back in 1963. When that happened, right, like everybody thought that the president was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald, right, for those first basically decade. And it doesn't start to happen until the mid 1970s, late 1970s, where some people start asking some pretty good questions. I mean, they're sure there were people that didn't believe it back then, but I'm saying, over 90% of Americans believe that. But as time has gone on, right, we come to, 6 months ago when Tucker Carlson, who's a huge media personality here in America, actually says on his broadcast that the CIA assassinated JFK. So you can see how that, it's just an example of what everybody believed something 70 years ago, and it's a little bit different today. So in that period, the brainwashing slowly wore off as more people were exposed to it. Same idea with the Federal Reserve, right? I learned about the Federal Reserve in high school and thought it has the word federal on it, so it must be a government agency, and they work for our benefit and they help us, print bonds and the whole nine yards. And I remember when I learned that it wasn't what I thought it was back in 2008, and almost nobody I talked to believed me. But today, so now this is 15 years later, almost everybody I talk to knows that the Federal Reserve is neither federal or does it have any reserves. So this is an idea of being, the brainwashing has faded away in the last 20 years. And fewer people believe that the Federal Reserve is what they were taught it was. And by the way, the word federal means contract, as per Webster's 1828. Lastly, the Iraq contract.
Interesting.
I mean, yeah. So federal government would be
I'll have to look that
contract
up.
mind control. Yeah. The quick example was the Iraq War. I just wanted to mention that there are a lot of people, this is one that people have been readily admitting to for, probably 10 years now, that they were wrong about this. But, and surely myself and many others thought it was bogus when Colin Powell stood up there and showed everybody that all these secret munition installations and everything from the satellite photos. But it's just another more recent example of how you were in the minority back in, say, 2008, 2010, if you thought the Iraq War was BS, starting that war. But, in the last 14, 15 years, you're in the minority now if you believe it was legit and that we operated from useful information. So anyway, just some just examples, right, of how things, right, beliefs influence everybody and how they change over time is all I was getting at with those examples. So
Sure, and I think what you've certainly covered here is the fact that there's definitely brainwashing there. Like it's irrefutable. Like we've seen things such as the Kennedy assassination, such as the Federal Reserve, such as the Iraq War, where there was a time when everybody believed it was this certain way. And if you came along and you said, "Oh no, it's not that way," people would have been like, "No, you're crazy," and you would have been like, "No, no, no, you're brainwashed." And they would have been like, "No, no, no, we're not brainwashed. It is that way." But
right.
give it decades, and it's like, yes, it has been revealed that there was a brainwashing there. Okay,
Right.
so the brainwashing exists. That's covered. Now, I like what you've got next. We start to get into the serious stuff here. So launch into that.
This is a big idea. And just to confirm what you're saying there, right? And keep in mind that there's pressure, right? There's pressure to go along with all the brainwashing, right? You're an outsider, an outcast, a conspiracy theorist, a weirdo, right? If you don't go along with it. So it pays to accept the brainwashing. That's maybe my biggest point I'll make tonight, right? It seems to be beneficial to you to go along with it. Anyway, so yeah, this is a big idea. I call this a big idea here. I'm going to suggest that there are a group of people here on the planet, call them entities if you like, that know exactly how reality works, how this reality we're in works. They know precisely how it works. And if nothing else, they've done everything they can to not let us find out how this reality works. And this would explain a whole lot if this idea can at least be contemplated by people listening, right? So there's this notion, pretty popular notion now. Here's a good example: the deep state, right? That was a term first dropped by a guy on a Bill Moyers interview. He was on our public broadcasting network many years ago, back in the 80s and 90s, maybe 2000s, and he had this guy come on and say, what's really running the United States government is this deep state. And he talked all about the contractors and the lifelong bureaucrats that, even though they, stepped out of elected office, they went into these think tanks and other organizations in DC. And so that's a good example that everybody thought you were crazy when that guy said that back in, 1993 or whatever. But today it's pretty well accepted that there's a deep state. And I'm suggesting that at the top of the top level of this deep state are beings, people, entities that are in control of all our institutions. And most importantly, they're in control of what we know, what we think we know, what we believe, based on their official status as the purveyors of truth. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And it had to be this way. That's going to be the zinger I'm going to throw out there now. In order for us to have the experience that we are having today in this place we call life on Earth, we had to be brainwashed. It wouldn't have worked without it. And I'll get into that in a little bit. I'll let you ask some questions. So,
Yeah, I've
go
definitely got
ahead.
questions about that. Do you want to cover this? How is the brainwashing done first, or go into questions now?
Yeah, no, we'll keep moving and then we'll get to your questions. So we'll
All right.
just toss that idea out there and let it spin for a little bit. So how is the brainwashing done, right? It's what's important to note is that it's, in order to be brainwashed, you have to be at a certain level of consciousness. I'll talk about that here in a second. And you have to be, to some degree, naive in order to be brainwashed, right? You have to be very trusting as well. Those kind of two factors that fit into it. And it's not like we should walk around not being generally trusting, because 99% of the people out there are trustworthy. But where the trust should be, the lack of trust should be used is in more, higher level areas, and especially in areas where something affects your life directly. Like if someone tells you that the New York Yankees won the 1954 World Series, and you go, okay, and you believe it, and 10 years later you're on Jeopardy, and you can, that information is useful to you, but it doesn't really matter if it wasn't true, right? Like, oh, I guess the Yankees didn't win the 1954 World Series, right? So that's not important. But when someone tells you smoking causes lung cancer, for example, that's an important bit of information to have, and the fact that it's not true comes as a shock to most everybody that I've ever encountered. So
Well, I
there's
wouldn't say
something
it
that,
comes as a shock. I would say it comes as a, what the hell is this Brad guy talking about?
well,
This guy
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Nobody. The irony is that nobody can believe, right, the actual truth, because they, for so long and for so many people, have believed the lie. But when they're confronted with the truth, they don't even have the wherewithal to look into it or ask questions or research it, right? It's just like, there's no way. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. So just some examples of that. And what's operating, right, at the level where we're in this state of consciousness are the two things I come back to all the time, which are fear and judgment. So all the different emotions and feelings that revolve around fear and judgment are what enable you to be easily brainwashed. And that goes straight to the David Hawkins stuff, the levels of consciousness we talked about in a podcast, I don't know, a couple months ago. And just briefly, that we're not going to go over the details, but he kind of had this magic level of 200, which he called courage. And a big part of that level 200 courage was courage to step out of the herd mentality, tribal instinct, the go along to get along stuff, and start to look into things for yourself and find out whether certain things operating in your reality are in fact true or not, or maybe they're limiting you or dragging you down or affecting you. So that's the magic number in his scale of consciousness, which was 0 to 1,000, by the way. And everything below it, the level 200, kind of falls into that fear and judgment category, right? Down to shame and guilt, apathy, grief, sadness, depression, pride. All these things are in this, fear and judgment realm. And when you're down in that space, it's almost a given that you're going to be heavily brainwashed. And that explains, in a good way, why people, we all know, and you go and tell them some factual information, like viruses don't exist, and they can't hear you. You could sit there for 10 hours and give them facts, and it won't make a dent because they're in this lower state of consciousness and are brainwashed to reject it. Make sense?
Yep.
So we end up in this overarching realm. We end up with what I like to say often, where we're just absolutely surrounded in beliefs masquerading as truths everywhere you look. It's all around us. And that's why society functions the way it functions, because of this fact. So I'll leave it there and toss it over to you and see what kind of questions we can get into here. What do you think?
Okay, ready?
Ready.
So, if we go back to the title of the podcast, it's Did We Agree to Be Brainwashed? So, you've elucidated that there are certain beliefs that we have that aren't true, right? Certain mass beliefs, and we believe them, and they get us into trouble by believing them because they're wrong, have wrong beliefs, or we act irrationally, just make mistakes and just go down the wrong path, essentially. So there seems to be some suggestion here that there's some sort of agreement at either an individual or a collective level or both for us to take on wrong beliefs. Is that what you're saying?
No. And you went to the
Okay.
big giant question. I was hoping we'd get to that at the end, but let's do it now. So
I thought we'd
obviously,
better go straight to it.
I guess so. Obviously, you, me, and everybody else weren't sitting there in, when we were 10 years old or 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 or whatever. And we said, okay, I guess I'm okay with being brainwashed. And we let somebody brainwash us, right? Obviously, that didn't happen to 99.999% of us, right?
Okay.
You agree?
Perhaps.
Did you ever agree to be brainwashed?
It didn't seem like that. Certainly didn't seem like I made a conscious decision, like a knowing, rational, totally awake state of consciousness kind of thing. And I went, you know what? I'm going to deliberately take on a wrong belief.
Right.
No, don't recall that.
Now you could suggest it would be a reasonable point to suggest that the Aristotle / Jesuit saying give me a child until they're 7 and I'll show you the man, that quote, right? Like, in other words, they're whatever they teach you up to age 7, children are basically a sponge, right? So whatever they learn up to age 7, it just deeply embeds. That's the belief imprinting idea we talked about in the previous podcast. And obviously that's tremendous brainwashing, right? So you could suggest that your parents brainwashed you and your early, first, second grade teachers, but they didn't do it. We all agree they didn't do it knowingly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they would have had to have been brainwashed to not do it, to do it unknowingly, unwittingly. But that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm talking about I'm talking about we have to go to metaphysics here. And if we have to go back to our podcast a few weeks ago, the Empowering Creation Story podcast, right? Where you were given three choices, right? A, you're the random result of particles bouncing together and after a Big Bang, right? The scientism belief. Or B, some powerful being sent you down here to try to learn lessons and be good, and hopefully you'll live a life that's qualifies to get you into heaven. Right, that's your other choice. And then the third choice is, of course, this idea that I tried to lay out in that podcast, which is that you actually wanted to come here. You chose to be here. Yes?
Therefore, it seems like the suggestion is that at some point before birth, before we entered this physical realm, there was some sort of decision made to go into a realm where there are these like egregores, these collective belief energies that we know will overpower us and we will be infused with false beliefs. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you got it. It's
Okay.
little to make it a little bit clearer, right? You have to think that, well, for starters, this notion that here, this will help explain this, right? That existence does not become non-existence, right? Whatever exists that never doesn't exist, right? It can transform. It's like it's Newton's law, right? Transformation energy, conservation of energy, right? Nothing can be created or destroyed. So,
Hmm.
are you with me there? So I'm just trying to get it on the sciencey, physicsy level. Now, of course, we all know that things, you know, creatures and humans die in this realm, but it's not the essence of those creatures that dies, right? It's the flesh suit that no longer propagates, but the actual being that operated that flesh suit is eternal. So it's been around since the beginning, which there, and of course, there is no beginning, and it'll be there till the end. And of course, there is no end in eternity, right? That's the very definition of the word. So beingness is eternal. With me?
Yes.
Therefore, this realm we call life on Earth is one possible realm to interact with. There are innumerable realms to interact with. This is one. And we can take the Jesus saying that many people are familiar with, that my father has many mansions idea, right? This would just be different spaces of awareness, different dimensions, if you like. You with me?
I'm with you.
Okay. So this one that we're in right now, you can think of it. So some people call this realm a hologram. The idea is getting more and more popular, or a virtual reality, or a matrix, right? Suggesting that it's programmed, right, in some way. What most of those people are suggesting is that there are evil entities that have programmed it, and they're nefarious, and you're trapped, and there's only certain ways out, and all these kinds of ideas that add to more suspicion and fear, worry, uncertainty, and doubt. But the alternative to that is, and this is what I'm suggesting here in this podcast, is that you, the real you, the bigger you, knew full well how this reality realm operates, and you chose to come down and interact with it for a period of 70, 80, 90, 100 years, according to how we mark time. Make sense?
All right. Let me put a question out there.
Yep.
Okay. So I would say the phase of noticing that most people engaged in, let's say, awakening are at is that we notice that there's some sort of negativity, like it seems like there's like some sort of power over us, right? We see like there's government and it doesn't align with what we perceive to be good for us, right? Or we're perceiving like that there's health advice. And then we're like, wait, that health advice that people have been telling us, it seems to be counter to our health, right? We seem to be noticing there's these certain ways things are and collective beliefs that kind of like don't work for us, right? And then we notice, yeah, why are we in this realm where, you know, it makes a bit of an existential metaphysical crisis where you think, wait, well, hold on, why are we living this life where there's this bad stuff like that? What's the point of that? Uh, Why would it be like that? Now, what you're saying seems to be that there we must have known it would be like this and done it willingly, which seems to imply that we must have known that there's some sort of benefit to coming to have this experience where there's all this like irrationality and just weird negative stuff going on.
Right.
Is that
Yeah.
what you're suggesting? That we knew that there was benefit?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I don't know that I'm going to
Okay.
talk about all of that in this podcast. I think I'm going to save some of that for later. But yes, you're spot on the mark in the sense that we were fully aware of how this particular reality operates, and we were fully excited to come down here and play in this reality. Now, I realize that that idea that we're playing is very troublesome to a lot of people, but it goes straight to the heart of what I'm going to be driving at forevermore in all our podcasts and courses that we do, is that we begin to treat this realm more like we're playing instead of as this serious life or death, horrendous things can happen, fearful way that we have been taught. So
Okay.
let me back step one mark here and remind everybody that everything in this world is offer and acceptance. This is the basis of the legal system, but it goes to everything, right? So when you get taught in in first grade that that whatever, that Saturn is the planet that's 75 billion miles away with rings around it, and it's dust rings and blah 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 blah. That's an offer to you, right? You don't have to accept that. Of course you do, because you're just a young kid and you don't know any better. But that continues on for the rest of your life. So when the TV set or your doctor tells you that smoking causes cancer, he's making an offer to you. He's offering you some information. And you could choose whether or not you want to accept his offer or whether you want some more proof, do your own research. So, in from that perspective, once you see and understand that, you'll see that all these things that most people believe in are just offers that have been accepted. You
Mhm.
see that?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? The COVID,
Almost every belief is just someone said it, and without having experiential observation, it was just accepted.
right. There's things like most of us, 99% of us know that when you turn a burner on your stove and you touch it, you're going to burn your hand, right? Most of us have done that, at least accidentally, right? Very few people believe that. Most of us know that, right? Experientially.
Mhm.
So sometimes I have to back up a little bit and make sure that that point is clear to everybody. There are plenty of things we know, right? We know we love our family and our children and our spouses and parents and friends, and we love movies and books and foods and hobbies and vacation locations, right? These are things we know. But the things that we believe, right, are the acceptance of offers. And we didn't have to accept them. So it was our free will choice to accept the offer. You with me?
Sure. Okay.
So you
So
knew.
I think
I'm going to
you
suggest that
finish. Go ahead.
me, and everybody else knew when before we incarnated here, chose to incarnate here, that we would be, shall I say, stripped of our eternal knowingness, and a surrogate knowingness was going to be embedded in us, otherwise known as the ego mind. And
A
that's the thinking.
surrogate knowingness. That
That's right.
is one of the coolest concepts I've ever heard in my life. A surrogate knowingness.
And that's what thoughts and beliefs are. Surrogate knowingness. Like you don't, you can't, you can't prove to me that you love your wife, right? But there's no doubt about it that you love your wife, right? Isn't that interesting?
Sure.
Nothing you could do. You couldn't write anything or say anything that would prove it to me. But you know through and through, or your mother, you love her, no doubt about it, right? So
Right.
there are these two different knowingnesses that we have, and what we're lost in is the realm of beliefs.
Hmm.
And that, though, all those beliefs are brainwashing.
Okay.
And
Well, I
to
think the
get to,
next question.
let me get one more
Oh, you
into
want to throw one
one
more
more
thing in?
point here, just to suggest to you that why we if we knew all this bad stuff was going on down here. To be fair, to be clear, that there's a balance of good and bad here, and I don't know the exact number, but it's they everything is to be in essentially equilibrium or 50-50 balance, and that's what makes up our realm that we could call life on Earth. We call it the realm of duality. So good and bad, right and wrong, up and down, left and right, male and female, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have these opposite ends of the pole that make this reality function. Yeah. That's the
Okay.
game. That's the game we entered.
Okay. So you're suggesting we entered this realm where there's, mm, surrogate knowingness and a truth. And yeah, there seems to be this all these concepts like right and wrong and what's correct, what's rational, what's irrational. What should I do? What shouldn't I do? And I suppose, as I mentioned before, you would have to be suggesting that there's some sort of benefit. And my next question would be, what benefit to a soul that already had knowingness or eternal knowingness or something like that? I was perhaps already aware of the objective truth. What benefit is there to go into a realm like this?
It's I the same and I don't want to I don't want to keep equating life to totally a game. I understand that it's serious. We all have things we got to work out. There's issues and problems and all the rest. But I got to say it. I would come back to you with this question: what benefit is there to you playing video games?
What
Or
benefit is there to me playing video games?
yeah, or a game of Monopoly with your family, or whatever, a game of Risk with your buddies. What benefit is there to it?
Well, I mean, I could throw out a lot of ideas, and I suppose ultimately they'd come down to something along the lines of joy or happiness.
There you
Would
go,
that be
having
fair?
fun. Yeah, you're having fun, right?
To
That
have
would
fun.
be, yeah. That, have a
Just seemed
why
like a
would
good idea. Oh, that seems like a good idea.
yeah why take a
Imagine if it was
vacation,
like that.
right? How about so for me, I did a lot of backpacking back in the day, and we would go off into these national forests, into the wilderness, and just dozens and dozens of problems come up every single trip, and we knew they were going to happen, right? You just stuff goes wrong,
Hmm.
right? Shoelaces break,
Right.
and bees come out of stumps and sting you, and mosquitoes attack, and water bottles pop open. You know what I mean? It was just a litany of problems, and yet I still go back and do them. Did these types of trips over and over and over again,
Right. So
knowing
you're saying that the core decision to experience the entire realm is very similar to the core decision you make to experience anything. Like you wouldn't
yeah,
watch a movie if it was just pure, like no suspense, right? If you weren't afraid or
yeah,
worried at some point, and you don't really do anything unless you get like an up and down to it, right? That's what makes it most gives it the most oomph, right?
exactly. I got one word. I'm going to sum it all up and say that our incarnation in this realm is an adventure like no other.
Hmm.
And the more you live your life like that, the better it is. because that's why you're here. Right. So if you get into this routine and this rut and this struggling to survive, right, it gets worse. Life gets worse and worse and worse for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see the people thriving, right, are they have this quality to their lives, right? We'll call it, and we'll call it enthusiasm for life. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the more enthusiasm that you have, the more life is good for you. Now, it's important to point out that our brainwashing is the opposite, right? The offer out there is to get stable and secure and predictable lifestyle. And that is what uh, brings a life of depression and misery and sadness and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Ayn Rand said that all that, all that belief stuff, she said that that was all like death wish. And it's interesting you say it like all that belief leads to like stillness and routine, and it kind of points to like just a total lack of activity almost. That's where it guides you. Kind of like
Right.
it narrows down the scope of everything until it's nothing, right? Until you're not moving at all.
Right.
Whenever people have pain in the body, they go to the doctor and the doctor says, "Oh, well, don't move that." All right. And then they come to me for coaching and they're like, "Oh, I've been told, the doctor told me don't move that, don't move that, don't move that, don't move that." I'm like, "This is the complete opposite of everything you should have been told. Let's start moving you again." And just as they start moving, they recover.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it seems like you're suggesting that part of the core brainwashing that we stepped into we stepped into a realm where there's going to be forces that are kind of like available to deceive us into just shutting down and annihilating ourselves. And
Right.
that's kind
After,
of like the ultimate scary thing that makes that makes it exciting.
right. More or less the opposite of what the popular offer is where you want to be.
Hmm.
The opposite, the polar opposite. So stable, safe, secure, right? There's nothing wrong with those things, right? We certainly don't want to be unstable, unsafe, or insecure, right? But the idea that you build your whole life around that is when things start to go south. Just aren't life is just not as exciting. And to be clear on that enthusiasm word, I just wanted to mention that from the Greek entheos, which the definition of that, of course, was divinely inspired, possessed by a god. So there's a lot to that, right? And the reason I'm bringing this all up here in this podcast is because everything we've known up until this point has suggested that this stable, safe, secure lifetime is a better choice than risk taking, following your passion and enthusiasm, taking chances, right? That was a less popular, less traveled road for most people. But now the opposite is true, just as of the last, we'll say, year or two. And people are going to be you're going to be more and more miserable the more you try to stick to the old way that humanity has apparently been living for the last 100 or 200 years, the stable, secure, safe route.
Okay.
So say I'll say the wisdom speakers of modern times, which I won't get into. But that has been our brainwashing, more or less. To trust the experts, play it safe, get yourself into a comfortable routine, and live out your life until you die of too many prescription meds at 75
Okay.
years old.
So
All
let's
right.
bring in the second point that you made, which was that I'm just going to read it as you said it. We're deliberately not taught how reality works. there are there are people or there are entities here in this realm who know how reality works, and they deliberately don't tell us, and they tell us the opposite to put us in an inferior position to them. So is that what you're maintaining, that there are entities who exist who completely know the nature of what you're talking about, and it's like their role to be the ones that deceive us? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's exactly what I'm saying. And now
Okay.
most people in the truther slash conspiracy theory, realms are trying to name who these bad guys are. And I'm just going to use the term bad guys over and over and over again. But in order for this realm to work the way it works, we have to believe the things we believe. And it's the collective belief that shapes how this reality works. So if we all believed something different, then this reality would be something totally different. You follow that?
Yes.
So the bad guys, in effect, and don't get me wrong, there are bad people that do bad things and nobody agrees with it and nobody's saying it's good or it's right. Well, I'm talking at a much higher level than, people that do bad things to other people. I'm talking about these entities that are what I call belief shapers. And that's their function here, is to be at the top level of all our major institutions: government, media, academia, banking, legal, etc. Right? They have set up a system that propagates this temporary reality we call life on Earth. And you can effectively call this reality duality. And you can call the reality that you spent most of your existence in as unity. So that's the real reality, and duality is the false reality. You with me?
And just okay, just right here in this context, can you define duality?
Yeah, up and down, good and bad, right and left, male
Hmm.
and female, logical and illogical. Remember one of the new ones I came up with that I thought of a couple weeks ago was the opposite of knowledge is ignorance. Where there's knowledge, there's ignorance. And of course, we're talking about the surrogate knowingness knowledge, right? The words and ideas we have in our heads. So that's duality.
So when you say duality is the fake reality or something, and then unity, well, what are you saying unity is?
The reality, the one true reality. You could come up with a million words for it. Let's call it heaven if you like.
Hmm.
Garden of Eden.
See,
Perfection.
duality seems like a kind of like duality seems like a belief system about reality.
Yeah, it is.
Is that fair?
Everything's a belief system. So here's Shakespeare from Hamlet, right? This quote drives some people insane, but I'll say it anyway because it's accurate. Right? Nothing is either good or bad, but it is thinking that makes it so.
Right.
Right?
So the duality is like a system of labeling reality good and bad, and opposed for and against all sorts of you know left to right constructs like that, right?
This reality is what we have been collectively brainwashed into believing is precisely that this entire reality is a belief system. It's not that it's not
Hmm.
real, right? It's not that it's not real. It's that our thoughts about it are completely subjective.
Okay. Um. So if we take a look at just some, there's certain brainwashings. Well, Kennedy assassination, Federal Reserve, Iraq War. We mentioned those before, right? So there's the truth of what happened, of what happens or whatever, right? And then are you saying that the duality, like we we came to experience this duality of like having all these conflictive thoughts about that, and that's
Mm,
somehow in some way a positive?
I didn't follow that. You have to rephrase that.
Sure, sure, sure. Let me omit the mentioning of the examples in the brainwashing, right? And just go back to the duality. Are you suggesting that we came to experience the to be immersed? Are you saying that we came to kind of like experience the truth, but while being immersed in the duality, and that's the fun of it?
Well, the fun of it is the adventure or the experience
Hmm.
because it's a bit, totally unlike where you exist eternally, right? There's none of it. Here's another way to look at things, right? Everything that's unreal is temporary. Like, can you name anything that isn't temporary?
Well, I'm not sure what you really mean by if you say it's unreal and it is temporary. Like, I don't know what that means. Like, for it to be temporary, doesn't have to be something. So I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, like, that lasts forever, shall we say, right? If something doesn't last forever, is it real?
Yeah, it seems like if something doesn't last forever, it's certainly like a perspective or something like that. Because
Right?
the actual stuff doesn't go away. Perspectives come and go.
Right? Like this planet won't be around in a cajillion years, right? Or
Okay.
Mount Everest will one day topple over and fall into become sand on the beach, which will eventually vanish. And right, whoever's here on the planet today won't be here in 1,000 years, right? So it's this
Okay.
ephemeral existence, right? So I'm just trying to drive at your question is that we have one of our brainwashing programs is that this is it,
Hmm.
right? This is all you got.
Right. The material.
Yeah. And you got 70, 80 years to get everything right. So
Right, right, right. So it seems like what you're suggesting is the brainwashing is that there's all this material, like that the current forms of things are exactly what they are. And that comes with a whole lot of fear and stuff like that. Like that whole Big Bang model and like entropy and things disappearing and just bleh. It's like a terrifying universe, right? So it's like a brainwashing that this is all exactly as it is, and it's like terrifying, and it's gonna make you like huddle in the corner and not go out of your apartment, right?
right, right. The basis of the egoic program, we'll call it the ego program, is fear and judgment. Right.
Hmm.
As soon as you believe that you are this body, this body that's can be harmed, and as soon as you start to compare your body to everybody else's bodies, that's judgment times a zillion, right?
Hmm.
You've got a recipe for a consciousness that can be easily deceived. Think about that a little bit.
Right. So it seems like, yeah, a lot of the brainwashing is that you are a vulnerable material body in a uh irrational, scary universe, and everything's out to get you. There's little things here and there that are trying to get in you and kill you, and you can randomly die at any second, and everything's bad, right?
Yeah, that would cause you to want to be stable and safe and secure and routine, right? All that adds up to that. Just give me a cave that I can have a saber-toothed tiger in the front of it to guard, and I'll make my spears and protect my family, and that's all I need.
Okay. Let me come back to the agreement then, right? So you say we agree to have that kind of brainwashing, right? Now that we've like defined the brainwashing a bit better or something, right? So let's say we agree to that. Um uh and then just say you live, you die, whatever, and then you're a soul again, then you look back at your life and just say you look back and yeah, you totally fell for all the brainwashing. And you're like, oh, no, I fell for it again. Oh, that's crazy. Oh, what a fun ride. Or are you only glad if you didn't fall for the brainwashing?
Well, so if you look at the Eastern philosophies, right, they all talk
Hmm.
about reincarnation, of course, right?
Hmm.
And all the gurus and yogis and sages from these traditions say that you've lived thousands of lives here.
Hmm.
And there's some question as to whether you have to come back or whether you want to come back. And I'm not going to get into that question tonight. But the key is that after the death of the body, right? There's the life review, which I talked about in the previous podcast, right? From all the NDE people now talking about that, where you kind of go through and you feel all the feelings of all the people that you ever interacted with. So if you were hurt people all the time, you get to feel how you hurt them. If you loved people all the time, you get to feel how you right, how they felt loved by you, et cetera, et cetera. But once you do that life review, you want to go set up another lifetime, and you want to get right what you got wrong in the previous lifetime.
Hmm.
That's what the Eastern yogis and Rinpoches and Zen masters all suggest. So you just keep coming back over and over and over again. Now, some other people suggest that it's karmic discharge. Like you have to come back if you're karmically tied to so many situations and people. Right?
Hmm.
It's like magnetic in a way. Right? So you really don't have a choice. Your consciousness is at such a low level that you can't even fathom not coming back. You have to come back, get redo things and pay off your karma and all the rest. Not sure
Hmm.
why. What was the lead question here? I kind of forgot it now.
I'm not exactly sure what the lead question was, but I can tell you what I'm driving at.
Go ahead.
Um, so, and you're kind of answering it as you've given this answer is like, I was kind of asking, is the point of it to not be to figure it out, right? Or
Yeah. So
is it
that's
totally okay to just be brainwashed and then you're like, hey, that was cool. I'll get brainwashed this time. That was fun.
well, that question's perfect because that's where I want to end this, and we're coming up on an hour here, so it's right on the money. So
Okay.
as I was trying to intimate a couple minutes ago, there's been a way of life for many centuries or millennia, and that way of life is now being disassembled. It's coming apart, and a lot of people can see it. A lot more can see it today than they could yesterday or last month or last year. And kind of COVID kind of is the start of it in my as I think about it. Just a lot more people waking up, and the reason for that is that collectively at the soul level, we have decided enough of us decided that we don't want to play this game as it's been played for many millennia any longer, and
Hmm.
we want to play a new game. Tired of this game. And there's it's a complex conversation to get into that. But what you're seeing now is a lot of people starting to wake up and question things, right? And they don't trust the government and they don't trust the media anymore. And they see all these, anybody who's not totally locked in to, a mainstream lifestyle is seeing this. Now there's a percentage of people that totally aren't seeing it. And these are the people that want to keep playing the old game, or souls, if you will, that want to stick with
Hmm.
the good and bad, right and wrong, up and down game. And so there, none of this, what I'm talking about, makes any sense to them. Just the crazy talk, right? All of it's crazy talk. Iraq war, viruses, lung cancer, it's all garbage to them. And they don't
Hmm.
want to hear it. Frankly, they don't even want to hear another word. They probably haven't listened this far. And those would be the people that are below the 200 mark. and are operating in the fear and judgment realm and can't hear a bit of truth. But they're the minority now, or they're becoming the minority. So I don't know
Yeah.
what numbers are going to be, but more than half of people on this planet right now want to play a new game.
Yeah, it
And
does
that,
feel a bit like that, right? Like, a bit sick of all this nonsense. Ugh. Can we just have the light now?
right?
Can we just have it all as it is, really? Just for a while, gosh.
So, yeah.
Bit
So it's
tiresome.
a raising of consciousness is what's happening collectively for everybody.
Hmm.
And it's just, you could say it's more light is here. We're in a different space in whatever dimension we're in. We're receiving more light and it's shining on the dark spots, right? The hidden spots. And those that were hiding stuff can't do it anymore. And to a lot of people, that seems like, oh, that's good. Let's get the bad guys, and once we get them all, we'll put them, send them in for justice and hanging and trials and prison. But that doesn't fix anything because what matters is what we believe. So the fix is to see our beliefs, see the power of those beliefs, and adjust those beliefs or eradicate those beliefs. And the more people that do that, the more reality starts to change.
Okay. Well, if I could add one last thing, it would be, the way I was asking a lot of the questions was I was like, okay, so you make this agreement before you were born, right? But just from the last 5 minutes or so, it actually seems like an agreement that you make moment to moment to be disempowered.
Sure.
And if you say people are like waking up, that seems like the more, you know, higher realms of being or something are just making a decision that, okay, now I'm going to just be more toward the unity and just less toward the deception and brainwashing.
Well,
That's how it's going to be now.
yeah, those higher realms of being is you, right? That's what's
Right.
making all the
Right.
decisions, right? The idea that
Hmm.
Matt is making the decisions is not accurate. It seems like it,
Hmm.
right? But there's the bigger you, the larger you is making those types of decisions. And all those decisions have already been made. So the
Well,
people
I
that
know I
want
said I was going to say one thing, but now I want to say one more thing. So it almost seems like it's not a bunch of different souls, just independently making the decision. It seems like you're suggesting like the highest being is making a decision
no, not really.
for
No,
for everything. No?
no,
Okay.
yeah, no, there's a collective
That'd
of
be pretty
souls.
intense.
Yeah, no, there's a collective of souls that
All right.
that are doing things, and this decision was made a long time ago from our perspective. I think the suggestion I've mentioned this before. There's something called the harmonic convergence that happened in 1987, and that's supposed to be this kind of line of demarcation where it was a choice of whether to go to the kind of the biblical Armageddon scenario or to do
Hmm.
this, and this is the route. And the entities and beings that were ruling this planet were leading us towards Armageddon. And the suggestion now is, of course, is that they have lost all their spiritual backing and power, but the humans that are still in control of the money and the institutions and the power brokers can't accept yet that their Armageddon finish isn't going to happen, and they're still putting up skirmishes and causing problems and doing things to keep us from reaching the goal that we had, which was to put an end to this game of good and evil. And so that's what we're living in right now, and that's what's playing out. And kind of evidence of that is how the COVID thing went away. We should be in like super duper uber lockdown at this point, right? Like digital IDs and vax passes
Hmm.
and masks forevermore. How did we get out of that? Why would they let us get out of that?
Yeah, because they
Right?
had us totally.
Like, I mean, totally had us. They had 90% of us probably. And why we got out of it is that they weren't allowed to push it forth. But it did sidetrack our ability to progress spiritually because the collective the collective feeling state dropped tremendously in that period of time, right? Anger, fear, sadness, the whole 9 yards was amplified tremendously. It slowed down our progression into something different. And you can see they've kind of tried a few times with monkeypox and RSV and some other things. They'll probably try another one, disease X, right? They keep talking about disease X. And some people can't see through the absurdity of that, right? They're predicting a deadly virus. Like, what? Really? How? How could you predict that? But they can sell it to 20% of the population. But it doesn't seem like they're going to be able to pull it off because they've lost the majority. Anyway, that's it. So in sum, we did agree to be brainwashed, and we've been agreeing to be brainwashed for millennia. If you are willing to buy into the idea that you've had many, many lifetimes here, which I think is accurate. But now we don't want to be brainwashed anymore. And so that's people waking up at their own pace, at their own speed. But the people you see asking questions and saying, stuff's not right, everything's not as it seems, those people are going to become more and more numerous. And that is the sign that the collective is no longer interested in playing the old game. So we now don't agree to be brainwashed anymore, or at least over 50% of us. There you have it. What do you think?
Sounds awesome. I would love to live in a non-brainwashing reality. That sounds just cool.
That's where you're from. But yeah, I get it. It's no fun, especially when it feels like the bad guys are winning, right?
For me, it's more just about like it's just bothersome to have so many people just saying brainwashing stuff around me all the time. Just anywhere you go, you hear it. Like you can't go anywhere or go on any social media with just hearing people saying stuff that you just know is false. And it's like 90% of the stuff that you hear people say, you're just like, oh, yeah, I used to think that before I thought about it for a bit. It's like, oh, please, just stop this. Just let me hear some good stuff. But I tell you what, I'm hearing more and more good stuff.
There you
More and
go.
more all the time.
That's it. So yeah, but fewer and fewer people are accepting the brainwashing, and they can't sell it anymore. And it's funny, the more you become unbrainwashed, the more ridiculous the stuff that they're trying to sell in the mainstream sounds to you. I mean, it just sounds ludicrous. Like, how could anybody buy this? And yet, 20, 30 years ago, I was buying it. I had no reason not to buy it, apparently. So that's a good sign that you're coming out of it. And it's just a matter of staying outside of judgment, because we were all once brainwashed just like those people are today. I don't think anybody avoided being brainwashed. Or, at least the first 20 years of their life. You don't find too many like 15-year-old conspiracy theorists out there. All right. I think they're starting to pop up a little bit, but you get my drift.
Sure.
It was purposeful.
Anything left?
Nope, that's it. I think we hit it all.
I reckon you go for it. I haven't mentioned the role that you think Take Your Power Back and that information plays in people's departure from brainwashing and awakening to unity, as you call it.
Well, that is the essence of taking your power back, of course, is that the brainwashing, all of it has been, the purpose of it is to disempower us. Had you had none of it, you would be fully empowered. So the course is aimed at slowly chipping away at and showing spots and places where that brainwashing has, affected us in ways not so positive, as well as techniques, practices, and so forth, to get back to where our power really originates from, which is our hearts, which is where you were for the first 3 years of your life, by the way.
And if I can add, it's not just an information course. It's not like just stuff like, hey, look at this. This thing's totally not true. What's the truth is this and
Nope.
that. No, it's an
Yeah.
experiential course. Can you touch
Yeah.
on that, Brad?
Yeah. None of it is that, that's what our freely available podcasts are for, is to, dissemble some of the lies. Yeah, the course is all experiential, and it's just really, it's a movement away from the areas that we're brainwashed, which is our minds, and techniques to get us back into a state of really of more presence and heart-centered awareness. And uh, that's the real key. It's not complicated. I always say it's simple, but not easy. And that's, the course is really revolves around getting people to refine that space, which is home, right? Home is where the heart is, as they say. So that's the movement. And that's where all our power generates from, by the way. The heart is, there's some mathematical number, but the heart is like 8,000 times more powerful than the brain or something like that. Anyway, that's the essence of the course, is to get us there.
Sounds
So there you
great.
have it.
Sign me up, mate.
It is. It's the best. Absolutely. So yeah, good questions.
Well, I guess
You,
that's it.
I thought you were going to ease us into this a little bit more, but you jumped right to the end game, which was great, and it worked out perfectly. So great questions, Matt. Appreciate it. You really picked it apart and got to the heart of it. And we hope everybody listening has some new and interesting information to contemplate and consider.
Right on. Thanks so much, Brad, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks everybody for listening. And we'll see you next week. Take care.